Yay, we're live. It is 7:45 and live. That was an unintentional and unfortunate pun. How's everybody doing tonight? Tonight we want to talk about the I made an armory for the tree fort, which is awesome. Just a rack basically for all the SIGs and the nines and all that stuff. It's really good for all the squirt guns. Just not the heavy artillery, not the Gatling guns and stuff, but all the handguns, water pistols. But I want to talk about turbo kits, and even though now I would argue that looking back, I think because of all the changes in the economies and stuff and tariffs and things, that we've seen the pricing of stuff, particularly like turbo kits and stuff, offshore stuff, go up quite a bit. But if we look back in the day, like the photo that I'm showing, the thumbnail I'm showing is a CX Racing one for a Civic, a D series Civic. So those things used to be like ultra cheap. Now everything seems like everything's quite a bit more now. Excuse me. But you could get like entire entire turbo kits, the exhaust manifold, the turbo, wastegates, intercooler tubing, all of that stuff, basically all of the hard parts, kind of all the things that you bolted on to make it work, the oil lines and fittings and all that stuff. And it's really, really, really inexpensive. Like I said, it's more now, which is unfortunate. And I'm hoping that we haven't gone through the heyday of of the inexpensive stuff. But that's not really what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is there were kits like this for, all manner of different things. So they had them obviously for all of the Honda stuff, all the B series and the D series and Preludes and all kinds of stuff, all of the 2Js and 1Js and RBs and, anything K series and anything that's popular. They had people like immediately did even just throw together turbo kits, because a lot of them honestly were not that great, didn't fit in everything, because it takes time and effort to build these kits for specific applications. And this is really, really important if you're trying to do it on a factory motor with everything present. Like if it's a B series that you've taken everything off of and you're putting a turbo on, doesn't have AC, and you don't care about any of that, it's like really pretty easy to do. But if you have let's say a K series and you have AC and you want to retain all that stuff and you want to retain all the factory stuff, making that work and making all those things fit for the different chassis and stuff, and the automatic transmissions and manual transmissions, a lot of times they could be different. The sedan might be different than the coupe and yada, yada, yada. So it could be all kinds of stuff. So a lot of those kits weren't the greatest at fitment and stuff. And maybe that's still the case. But bolting on all of the hard parts, even for the average guy, and again, this is why YouTube is so great, that if you went to bolt all this stuff on, and obviously the vast majority of these kits, none of them came with instructions. I know, because I did instructions for the guys at CX Racing. We tested a few of their kits, and we took the photos, and then they paid me basically to write up some stuff on how to put them on, how to do this intercooler stuff and everything. Because obviously we had gone through all that and we'd taken all the pictures step by step. So it's just a matter of now writing down what we did. So it's fairly easy. So we did that for some of the stuff. But the vast majority of stuff back then, and I think even now, they don't come with that. But because so many people have bought these kinds of kits and put them on these kinds of vehicles, that you just go to YouTube and you have some guy, hey, I put this on my 96 Civic, whatever, and here's how he did it. We had to do this and cut this and move this and change this, and we had to move this for the intercooler. We had to do all this stuff. So really the reality is that bolting the stuff on, taking the stock exhaust manifold off, bolting on the turbo manifold, bolting on the turbo, or figuring out, this is why YouTube is great, figuring out, do I got to put the turbo on first before I put the manifold on? Or can I put those together outside of that? It's easy to get to everything and then put the manifold on. Do I still have access to all the bolts? Does all that work out? Usually if it's bolting together stuff and they don't have to fabricate a whole bunch of stuff like on the exhaust side, and then all the discharge stuff, they've done a fairly good job of giving you the bends and the couplers that they need and routing the thing. from the discharge of the turbo through the intercooler and then up through some opening in the fender well or whatever, and then over to the throttle body. And I'd say most people probably could get that done. They could bolt it on and make it work. So it would, and then you get oil to it. Sometimes if you have to drill and tap stuff, that's a little bit more problematic. A lot of times they had adapters for existing fittings. If your particular engine had an oil pressure sending unit or a gauge or something, and you could just tee off of that to feed the turbo. And then sometimes putting the drain in was a difficult thing for lots of people. A lot of times the best way to do it is just drop the pan, weld in a bung, put it in there. You could also punch holes in there and tap them like we did back in the old days with the Vortex stuff. So there are different ways to do that. But even that, even if you couldn't weld and you could take it in somewhere, you go, okay, look, I drill the hole or I mark the hole and this is where this thing needs to go. And they punch a hole and they put it in there. They weld it for you. You clean it up, maybe paint the outside of it or whatever. And then you have to put it back on. That takes you another day or whatever. That's not a big deal. Then you do that and you have your drain fitting and you have your turbo kit on and the thing starts up and it runs. But unfortunately, as much as people want to now go out and just stand on this thing and hope for the best, it has stock injectors in it and it has a stock timing curve in it for an NA motor. So the first hurdle is, will it even recognize going into boost? Like if it's a speed density thing, like a Honda application, will the map sensor even recognize positive pressure? Will it go above? Is it more than a 1-bar map sensor? Can it even register that? Can you trick it? Can you bleed some of the thing out? Will it recognize up to a certain point? Those are all things that you find out when you dive into doing something like this in a particular engine family. Again, because thousands of people have done it, all of the information is there. You can go and find out, hey, yeah, this is how we tricked it. We put this adapter on the map sensor or put this other map sensor or went in and, like the thing we're going to talk about is we put Honda on it or Chrome or something else and we're able to dial it in. Back in the day with the 5-liter Mustang stuff, we would put FMUs on them. And the FMUs basically would just clamp the return line, raise the fuel pressure, add a bunch of fuel flow, and then hopefully it added the right amount. And like we've talked about many times, when I'm doing all this tuning and I show you the videos on testing various things, and we run it at 10 to 1, 11 to 1, 12 to 1, 13 to 1, whatever, and you can see that the air fuel doesn't have a big change. So if you put a bunch of fuel in it and it was 10 to 1 and maybe got into 11s, and it's fine. It works. It still makes power and still works. That's why the FMUs were able to work fairly well. And then some of the Honda stuff, they did that too. The problem is that they didn't do anything to timing. So then you had to figure out a way to retard timing. So how do you do that? And how do you do it just under boost? Because if you can, and a lot of guys did this. We did this back in the day with the Jackson Racing Supercharger stuff, is you just take timing manually out. Just turn the distributor. But then it'd be down 6 degrees or 8 degrees or whatever you took out. It'd be down all the time. That's not ideal, obviously, because then it doesn't run very well when it's out of boost, when it's cruising or anything. EGTs get high, and there's all sorts of bad things associated with that. So ultimately, and then there were ways like we did the boost timing retard stuff. If you have a distributor, we could hook a crane or an MSD up, and so it retard timing based on a boost reference it was getting from some map sensor. And it would, and you could retard it in degrees, and you could retard it 1 degree or 1.5 degree. But if you didn't have that available for your application, then you couldn't do that. So then the next best thing is the ideal thing is to put big enough injectors in it and then control those with either a standalone management system, which you could put in, which is expensive, or if you are lucky enough, your engine family has there's somebody that has the ability to tune that factory ECU. So you can go in and manipulate it. If you go from 19 or 20 or 25 pound injectors to 50s or 100s or whatever you've put in there, you can go in and go, okay, look, this thing has injectors now that are 4 times as big as they were. So I got to take a bunch of fuel away. And even I would argue the more important thing is now you can go in, you can run like if you put Honda on a Honda, for instance, or Chrome or any of these other things, you could go in and run it with a different map sensor. And now you could only have it take timing away under boost, which is great because then it was running like it did when it was NA. It was perfect, ran perfect. And then now you have the bigger injectors. You got enough fuel to supply the added power when it does go into boost. When it's NA, you could have just used the stock ones because you weren't, you were making the same amount of power that you when it was NA. So now you can go in and tune it, and it can be right basically everywhere. But the downside to that is now you're talking about spending money on bigger injectors to feed the injectors and to feed this turbo. You're going to have a bigger pump, and either a way like Hondata to access the factory fuel system, fuel injection, or a standalone fuel injection. So those things, all of those things, particularly back in the day when these kits were so inexpensive, those things would be more expensive than the kit was. So the tuning part of it would actually cost you more than the turbo did. So turbo versus tuning, the turbo was a better deal than the tuning, but you can't get what you should out of a turbo setup for anything unless the tune is right. You could go out and stand on it, and lots of guys did. Lots of guys I saw guys putting FMUs on them, not even putting another pump in it, just an FMU. Wow, and then going out and relying on whatever the wastegate setting was, whatever the spring rate was in that wastegate that they got sent with the kit, which was never checked, I'm sure. It's a 7-pound. It's not 7 pounds. It's way more than that. And then they would go out and run 10 pounds or 12 pounds or whatever on their stock motor with an FMU and a stock pump and not have taken any timing out of it. And then also to spice things up just a little bit more, they will have done it on pump gas too. So lots of them blew up because of that. So if it's not right, it's going to be right now that you got to take the motor out and fix it, because unless it has the right air fuel, unless it has the right timing and you add boost to it, it's definitely going to break. So let's see what you guys got to say tonight. Let's see. Does the tune cost more than the turbo kit? Did I just add it to the chat? I think I did. Yeah. Let's do a poll instead. Land the turbo kit. Turbo versus tune. Good evening, Jordan. What's going on? Dennis. Pegasus. Nice. Clash of the Titans. One of my favorite movies. The original one. Just pulled my 6.2 apart and found a dead lifter and a wiped cam lobe. Neither of those are good. Luckily, cams and lifters are easy to change. They are deceptive. You need more than just a turbo and a manifold to make power. Yeah, and lots of guys bought that. Oh, I just bought a turbo. And either if you just bought a turbo by itself, that's great. You bought a $150 turbo or $200 or $300 or whatever it was. Like, good. Now you have nothing except for a turbo to stare at, which is awesome to set it on your desk and spin it around and make turbo-y noises, but it's not really going to help you make power. Grady D16 kits for $1,500 for the kit. Yeah, and what did Grady come with? An FMU or something? Are superchargers inherently harder on catalytic converters compared to turbos? Why would that be the case? I'm looking at a cam bearings, lifters, springs, a whole kit and caboodle. I'm hoping that you're going to RichardOldnerPerformance.com or Brian Tooley Racing for all of that stuff. How much boost can a stock 5.3 take without adding ring gap? There's no way to know, because you don't know what the gap is. You don't know what heat you're putting into the rings. You don't know how long you're putting it in there for. You don't know any of those things. So there's no number there, unfortunately. The Rock Turbo Kit D16s were 1,800. Yeah, I tested. I don't think I tested a Grady one. I was there when we ran it on the chassis dyno with the Turbo Magazine guys. I did test the Edelbrock kits though. Turbocharging has become a whole lot cheaper, but there will always be beginners with beginner budget knowledge, ability, where bolt-ons. Turbocharging is cheaper now than it was in the 80s, but it's more expensive now than it was 10 years ago. So I have a Grady kit and 2 Edelbrock kits. I like to collect old kits. No doubt you must do your homework when mapping out your turbo. Shows like these help a lot. I'm happy to help. Outdoors is not about boost pressure, it's about heat, which of course is a byproduct of boost. It's the ring heat though is a byproduct of more than just boost. It's not a direct correlation. In some cases, the front cover might work well for an oil return. FM people don't be knowing about those, yeah. Hey, dogs. Hey, how about if we be quiet? Oh, he's coming to get me now. What are you doing? Who are we barking at, huh? Why don't you be quiet? We just took a hike over. We got to see some deer, and we got to see some quail. We got to see all kinds of stuff, huh? Knock sensors to retard timing. Yep. Ring gap needs to be checked. Factory, they're all over the place. Had a 6 liter that was 25. Also had a 4.8 that was 13. Yeah, one of those will work really good. One of them, not so much. Perfect topic. Looking for starting point for total timing using my MSD BTM on my old school build Fox Body Vortec 10 PSI factory heads. What should I shoot for? Well, what do you have the NA timing at? If you're tuning it, I probably would take I'd probably take 2 per pound out of it right now. I don't know what fuel you're using. The problem with aftermarket ECU is a smog test. A lot of guys. Let's see here. A lot of guys will bolt in a couple small things before they get a tune. I have no plans to use a turbo. 10 pounds all day on a stock D16 FMU, no pump. Including the tune for the turbo kit. Are we included? Are you asking me if we are? This live feed isn't about that. It's more about generic stuff. Picked up a front LS cover, has 2 -8s, a -8, -10 return line, $100 online. 365,000 miles on the engine, have the factory head gaskets. Now I'm thinking I need to check the bottom end bearings too. My truck has 360 or 350 on it. It still runs good. Jimmy's has really good bearings in it. The cam and main bearings were fine on his. His had 350 or so. He lost a cam bearing in it, but the rod and the main bearings were fine. When you release tunes, would it be possible for someone in the group to convert the files from HPT files to PCM hammer friendly files for poor folks? I don't know what that is. I'm looking at errors in BTR, but not sure which cam to go with. But there's no bad choice there. One of them is just a lot less money. More than Willie, if you're adding a turbo kit and upgrading fuel system, it should definitely be in your best interest to have a dyno tuned. Also, ATL dyno tuning starts at $1,000. A Mark III Supra. I was set up to have a 2J build done by a shop. Didn't work out, and I'm looking at doing the majority of the work myself. 2J turboed or 5.3 LS turboed, bang for the buck. Well, there's no. I mean, if you already have a motor, then it's probably easier to turbo that one. If you have to go buy a different motor, a 5.3 is a lot less expensive to make the same amount of power with than a 2J is. Can I just slap a turbo on my 93 4-liter HO Jeep as is before the tune? Sure. Yeah, he left. He's laying down. Turbo and manifold, piping injectors, and ECU for Grady. They did have an ECU from Grady. Good evening, sir. Videos are very informative. NA timing at base. What I want to know is how much total timing is that thing running NA? Like an NA small block forward will usually be 35 or 36 degrees. So are you running that NA, or are you running 30? Are you running 40? Because then you have to know how much to take away, whatever your NA base stuff is. Like, what is it at wide open throttle with no boost? I know I asked a few weeks ago, but how are guys running their water lines for turbos on LS engines? Does anybody know how to? Are you asking how to plumb them? Stack electric turbo on top of your 1-barrel Rochester 292. That's my plan anyway. What is a stack electric turbo? For supercharger catalytic converter questions, I've had a hard time with my supercharged F-150 and converters. Is it an aftermarket supercharger or something? Is this a tune issue? Because the factories tend to go with superchargers and not turbos. I'm convinced I need a torque storm for my NEMIC 5.2 Ram. That would help. Drop the new engine in my Jeep. I have the old block I'm looking into building. Perhaps EGTs are lower on turbo cars because heat converts to turbine spinning. I don't think that that's the case. Good to know the main bearing survived. What's your recommendation for cam spring and lifters LS2? Well, what is it you're trying to achieve with your 6.2? Like, how much power do you want to make and all that? A reasonable chassis dyno should be $100 an hour. That's why I pay to have Nick at Boosted Innovations dyno my setup. Yeah, and it's more than just the... Is that just a dyno, or is that also tuning involved? Are the Magnuson Heartbeat superchargers good? A buddy of mine gifted me one. I want to put it on my LQ9 with all forged internals. Yeah, what size Magnuson is it? Your motor will take every bit of what a Magnuson has to offer. Grady has a piggyback like an Edelbrock, not an ECU. Okay. Yeah, we didn't use that. We used Honda when we ran it on the engine dyno. Of an 05 Denali, LQ9, 4L65, all-wheel drive. It has 410 gears, 243 heads. Want something a little more rowdy than a Truck Norris cam. Would you recommend a 469 cam with a stall or without? Yeah, you can put that if you want that kind of cam in there. It's going to lose low-speed power a fair bit compared to a Truck Norris or a low-buck truck. It's going to just make more power above 5,000 or 5,500 than that kind of cam is. So if that's what you want, a 3,000 stall converter would help that a lot. I think you can use VCM editor to view tune files without buying anything. Compare the stock file to the tune file and use the compare list to make your edits in PC Hammer. So on a 5.3, would you recommend decapping flex fuel injectors or just buy a set of decas? The problem that we see, and we've been experimenting with decapping stuff, is that, and this is the same thing I've been saying for the last forever, since we first did this on the Honda 20 years ago or whatever, is that when you do decap them, a lot of times they're not even after you do that. So what most of the people that are selling these decap injectors are, what they do is they do a whole bunch of them and then they group them together. And then if you flow them all, which you should do, then you can flow them all and go, okay, this group is the +3s or -1s or -2s or whatever the percentage is. Group them all together so that they're all the same. Where on the blocks are they running water lines? Or here folks using the steam ports, but nobody really goes into detail or shows running of water lines. They only show running oil lines. That's me and Nick both on my laptop tuning the vehicle, but usually he charges around $650 to dyno tune a boosted LS. Does the tune cost more than the turbo kit? 44% saying yes, 56 saying no. Just an electric turbo, but no electric speed control. Just turn it on in third up the hills for a little while. What I have not seen an electric turbo that will make any kind of power, because the power required to spin that, the electric motor to spin something that will produce flow enough to support 150 or 200 horsepower is that's a lot of juice. This is an unplanned engine repair, not a deliberate engine build. Okay. Well, but it is a deliberate engine build now. If you're choosing different things to achieve a goal, this is an engine build. And you may not have planned for it, but you're still doing it. So you have to decide, where do I want to make power? And then how much power do I want to make? Because you're picking a camshaft, and those are critical elements for camshaft choice. In your opinion, does a Truck Plus cam sound much better than seems like it would with 107 versus a 107 with a 111? I don't know how you're picking sound based on LSA when you have different lift and duration numbers there, particularly duration numbers. So, and I don't know, are you judging the sound of the cam on just idle quality, or what are you doing? I don't know that I've ever, and I should, because I know that people are, that's a thing to them. But I've never, when I'm dyno testing, I don't care about the idle. I should, but I don't, because I care about the power. And so I guess I should listen to idle them. But the problem is, on an engine dyno, it's a lot louder than it is in a car. And you hear it differently in the cab of your car or standing outside your car with your factory style exhaust than we do in the engine dyno. Kind of question. I like the stock performance. Wouldn't mind a little more low end grunt. It's a highway cruiser, occasionally tow rig. Then I wouldn't pick a 469 cam for that. Run the low buck truck and the Truck Plus on the same setup. And did you do a cam swap on the same vehicle and they sounded the same? What's the best quench clearance for a big block Ford stroker with cast iron heads? What's the max static compression I can run on 91? There's no, you can run an unlimited amount of static compression. You just have to run a really, really big camshaft. And so you can run the Mike Miller. They built a big block Chevy that made 1,000 horsepower and 87 octane. So, and it had really high static compression, but it had a really, really big camshaft in it too. So you can get away with that depending, but none of those are the right question. The right question is, how much power do you want to make? How do you think the drivability would be with an LS1 sloppy stage 2 AFR heads, 2800 stall, 71 Chevelle? I think with that converter, it would be fine. Max cam on an LQ4 versus an LQ9. I don't know what you mean. You can run the same cam on both of those. If you're asking about, I'm speculating here because I don't know what question you're asking. If you're asking about piston to valve clearance, is the same for both those motors. It doesn't matter that one's a dish piston and one's a flat top, if that's your question. Low buck truck or truck Norris in place of the factory VVT cam. Those two cams will do, I mean, from your perspective, they'll do the same thing. So there's no choice between those two cams in terms of performance or whatever. So that they would be, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the two if you ran both of the cams in your vehicle. So you would decide what you're going to get based on something else. Ran them both on a 6-liter and the low buck truck on a 5.3 and 3. And 3 tested sounded the same. The idle sounded the same. It wouldn't surprise me if they idled very similarly. With more duration and a slightly wider LSA, and a different split intake to exhaust, it wouldn't surprise me that they were similar. Is it even possible to keep VVT with one of your truck cams? No. It's difficult to keep VVT even with a dedicated performance VVT cam. You're keeping it, but what you're doing is one of two things usually. Usually you're dramatically limiting it. So you put VVT limiters in there because you might have 30, 40, 50 degrees of swing. They don't normally use all of that, but that's what they have available. And so you put limiters on it that only allow 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 degrees, whatever the limiters are for your particular application. And then sometimes that you put eliminators in there, you basically just lock it out, so it becomes a fixed cam. And in which case you just get rid of VVT and just put a regular cam in it. 302 EEC4 wide open throttle table says 26 degrees commanded, base is set at 10. MSD BTM is limited to 15 degrees. Pulls, I've heard everything from 17 to 26. Is your boost timing retard set up so that you take out a certain amount of timing per pound of boost? That's normally the way that they work. If you can have it work a different way than that, let me know. I haven't heard of it. But around, again, I'm assuming that you're running pump gas with all this. A factory 5-liter Ford will make best power at about 35 degrees at the horsepower peak. A stock one, whatever, a modified one, they're all going to be right around there. Then normally what I would do is I would take away 2 degrees per pound of boost. So you said you're running 10 pounds. That would be, you'd be taking away 20 pounds. That'd bring you down to 15. That will be safe. Then I would slowly add it back and see what you can get away with. I get compliments all the time on how good my truck sounds. The low buck truck cam. It does sound cammy. I thought cam overlap would determine the idle quality for EFI, brakes, air conditioning. Why pick LSA overlap for sound? How much boost do you think I could run on a 383 LS with a stock fuel system? If I wanted to install the turbo kit, I got to upgrade fuel system down the line. You won't be able to run hardly any with factory injectors and a factory pump. Almost nothing, depending on what size injector you put in there. If you put the stock fuel rail is fine. The stock fuel lines are fine. You need a much bigger pump to put boost on a 383, and you need much bigger injectors. Anyone know how big an intake valve you can run on a 706 head on a 5.3 and stock bore? Well, the bore shouldn't be the thing that limits you on putting a valve size in a 706 head. The 706 head limits that. You shouldn't ever want to put a 2165 valve in there because that's going to be useless. You should put a 2-inch valve in there, which is what everybody does. You could go to a 2040, I think, or something like that, somewhere in there. But again, you shouldn't be looking for what's the biggest valve. You should be looking for what is my desired power output, and then how do I achieve that? Can I get that with a 2-inch valve? More than likely, the answer is yes, if the head's poured properly. Do you have to break out the degree wheel when you swap cams? No. You can take up to 3 degrees for PSI, but start at 0 to 5. Just wanted to target total timing on pump gas. What are your thoughts on building a DoD engine as opposed to just getting an engine without it to start with? You can do either one. You can delete the DoD stuff. You will definitely want to get rid of the DoD lifters. And you'll want to plug the actuators, the provisions for the actuators. Can you delete the VVT and use the same cam? You can lock the cam in place. A VVT cam has a unique snout because it's oiled. So I don't know why you'd want to do that. Your Lubbock truck and Truck Plus cams have the same center line. I recently watched the LSA episode of Engine Masters, and they saw nice gains when only moving the exhaust lobe. TDS 2300 for the Magnus on the LQ4. Fully forged internals is safe at what kind of horsepower? Well, on an LQ4, we've made 1,540 horsepower with a stock block, stock crank, stock rod, stock pistons, and added rain gap. So that supercharger won't be anywhere near that. So you're good to whatever that supercharger will do. As long as you have ring gap. Safely able to run 3 pounds of boost on a stock Element 7 fuel system on a 6-liter. £3 on a stock one. Stock injectors have about enough for 400 horsepower. The pump should be good for that too. How big an exhaust valve could I run on a 706 head? Most people put a 155 or 56 in it. Again, your question should not be that. Your question should be, how much can I get the head to flow? Or how much power do I want to make? And then how much head flow do I need? And then can I get that? That should be your direction. How much variance in airfare do you see between the front and back cylinders under boost? That's not where you see it. You see it on all of the different cylinders have different variations in air fuel. It's not just a front and back thing. It's not a, oh, we're starving the fronts. That's not a thing. Particularly not with a truck manifold, because that's not the way that it's set up. Order a Truck Plus, LQ4, NA for now, going to turbo and converter in the future. Hopefully I made the right call on the cam. Yeah, there's not a bad choice there of any of those cams with a turbo. What piston would you use if you're going to NA build and max horsepower? What engine is this and what are you doing with it and stuff? I was about to mention what I do, but this man knows far more, so I'm going to listen. You can talk about what you do. That's all good. That's why we're here. Everybody here learns, including me. That's why I come here. $162. I hope people are not throwing that out there for the exhaust valve size, because that's not what people are putting in them. If I get a Lubbock truck for my 6.2, do I need to change the factory springs? Does your 6.2 Denali have, it has rec port heads on it, so you don't need to change those. Those are 550 of springs already. Mass flow is what you chase, not boost pressure. Boost has a relationship to airflow, but it isn't one-to-one. Boost is what people look at. People don't look at mass flow. Nobody has a mass flow gauge. Contrary to what Gail wants people to have, nobody has a mass flow gauge. 155 is standard exhaust valve. I was curious just how big I wanted to make as much as possible with as little boost as possible. Flow is king. But that's not accurate. A bigger valve or even more head flow is not necessarily going to make you more power NA. And the amount of power that you make for each pound of boost is a function of the NA power. Now the topic of your streams, they turn into mainly LS cam boost questions. Actually, all of my discussion at the beginning of this was Honda. I just watched your piston flip video, laugh every time because the results speak for themselves. Myth has been going on forever. It's continually perpetuated in that sphere. On logs, I look at mass flow. Yeah, if you're tuning it, you can look at that if you're still using the mass air meter. But eventually, even on certainly on LS stuff, people eventually go past the mass air meter and they just get rid of it, and then they just use speed density. But the average guy is looking at a boost gauge and he wants to know how much power he's making and then in relation to whatever boost level they're at. The 6-liter truck engine the same as other 6 liters that came in the Corvette, and what makes the Corvette engine rev higher? Is it the tune and springs? A Corvette 6-liter is aluminum, and the vast majority of 6-liter truck engines are going to be iron. Some of them are aluminum, and then the 6.2s would be aluminum. But a Corvette engine has an LS2 camshaft in it. The truck's going to have a truck camshaft in it. The truck's going to have a truck intake manifold on it. Not that that really affects it dramatically, because that intake manifold, particularly a Trailblazer SS, is as good or better than the LS2 in the 6-liter. The LS2, like I said, has the good cam in it. It has an LS2 camshaft in it, like an LS6 camshaft. It also has the LS2 intake and also has 243 heads, but some of the trucks have those also. After a lot of research and personal experience, I think the robot truck Norris truck plus size cams are good for street-driven LS vehicles, generally speaking. Yeah, and they're also really good for turbo stuff. And I think that size camshaft is also what I would pick for a small block Ford and for a small block Chevy and for, for a Dodge and all these other things too. Ever do anything with an 80s 2.5 liter Mitsubishi turbo? Are you talking about you're not talking about the Dodge ones, right? No, those were 2.2s and 2.5s. Otherwise, I don't know which one you're talking about. Well, I was going to say the way I tuned my 4G63, target 11.8, then 0 timing once I get the mass airflow I want at reasonable air temps, then start introducing timing. Okay. Does your 4G63 have a mass air meter on it? What piston questions? LS3 with 823 heads? Well, obviously you're not going for maximum power with 823 heads, because those wouldn't be the heads that you would use for a maximum power thing. So you're just putting pistons in a LS3 then, right? But there's lots of good pistons. I like flat top pistons because with valve release, so that you can put a camshaft in it. There's lots of good pistons out there. Summit Racing stuff is good. K1 stuff is good. Bullet stuff is good. There's lots of good ones out there. How much headroom do you recommend when choosing springs for a cam? How much is too much? Ideally, what you want is between 30 and 50 thousandths between coil bind and the valve lift. So that's not to say on a 550 lift cam you need to add 30 to 50 to that, like put a 600 spring in it. That's not how that works. A 550 lift spring on a 550 lift cam has that much leeway already. So you don't want to put a 600 lift spring on a 550 lift cam. You can. And you certainly don't want a 650 or 660 lift spring on a 550 lift cam. Any time frame on the turbo manifold? Nope, not yet. I agree with the philosophy that with the intake valve, boost power, byproduct VNA power, but under boost. There's no but. That's 100% true. That's the way that it works. That's the math. My 94 Civic hatchback, D16, D28 ball bearing, Joe Valley hub dyno, 353 horsepower on a Honda. That's pretty good for a, I'd like to know what size T28 it is. That seems like a lot of power on a chassis dyno for a T28 size turbo. Either the impeller or the exhaust valve becomes a restriction of flow. Once you max out the turbo, either side, the hot side or the cold side, you can get to both. If you get to both simultaneously, that's ideal. That's hard to do. That takes some science. But if you can max a turbo out, let's say you have a turbo that's capable of making 1,000 horsepower, and you make 1,000 horsepower, doing head porting and stuff is not going to do anything. The turbo has already done what it's going to do. Truck cams are turbo cams. That's right. Just like every cam. The first car was a 90 Shadow. Okay. Yeah, we're talking about the same one. I have a Dodge Omni with a 2.2 in it, but I also have a 2.5 that has forged rods and pistons and stuff in it, so that we're putting together. So yeah, I'm familiar with those. Went with one from an Evo, less restrictive and can measure more. Okay. Yeah, Evos are good stuff. For an LY6 engine, will I be able to rev higher if I put a Ripper cam in it, as the cam makes high horsepower on the higher RPM of the curve? Will you be able to rev higher than what? And that cam compared to what cam are you talking about? Peak airflow on the turbo that's on is usually 44 pounds a minute. Okay. We'll say I've seen cams affect knock threshold. I would go one step further than that so that you understand what you're saying. I would argue that the cam doesn't affect that. What I would argue what that does is NA power. So you're looking at back pressure. So back pressure will definitely affect the knock threshold. You might affect it with, I don't know that you'd affect it with overlap or blow by or any of these things nearly as much as if you have possibly excessive back pressure, which you would tend to get from making more NA power. That's what a lot of guys don't realize. I get cam guys that don't understand this. And they tell me about this all the time. Oh yeah, this cam makes a lot more power. I'm like, I know it does. It makes more power under boost. This cam makes this much more power. I said, that's because this cam makes this much more power NA. And the turbo is the multiplier. So if you have a cam that now made, like for instance, our low buck truck camshaft, or the Ripper cam, or the Truck Plus cam. Ripper's 50, low buck truck 60. The Truck Plus is 75. So if we put a camshaft in it that makes 75 extra NA horsepower, we are definitely going to affect the back pressure, and we're also definitely going to affect the knock threshold because we've made a lot more NA power. That's going to translate into a lot more back pressure. Not because the camshaft made back pressure. The camshaft didn't do that other than it made more power. And now it's going to make more back pressure because it made more power. We could also make more back pressure by just making the motor bigger. Same turbo setup, same all that. Go from a 4.8 to a 5.3 or then up to a 6.0. We will have more back pressure with the same turbo. But we didn't change the cam timing. So it's not the cam, it's the more NA power. Is there any downside to gapping rings for future boosts? No, you should definitely do that. Ever done a big bang motor without ported heads? What was the turbo intake temp, boost level, less intake flow after a certain point? Causes either or both increased charge temperature or boost pressure. We wanted to, on the big bang stuff particularly, I wanted to get to the power limit of the stock bottom end. I didn't care about cylinder heads or camshaft. All we wanted was the NA power to be higher, much higher than stock, and usually 100 or 150 horsepower more than stock. So that then when we added the turbos, we could get to the breaking point of the stock bottom end, and we could do it at some reasonable boost level. I didn't want to introduce like high charge temperatures and that, because if we would have just stayed with a stock cam, or I don't know that the heads would have held us back dramatically, but we could have run the stock heads or the stock intake manifold. We could have done all that. But that wasn't what the test regiment was. Like I said, I wanted to get there, and I actually wanted to get there at the lowest boost level that we could. That's why at 29.5 pounds or 30 pounds or whatever, we were able to get to 1,560 or 1,540 horsepower. I wanted it to come at a reasonable boost level. I didn't want to run 40 or 50 or 60 pounds because that in itself is bad, particularly with charge temperature stuff. I asked you a question earlier, another video I posted here to make it easy. There you go. So it's lowering back pressure, reducing cylinder heat too, I suspect. I don't know what you're asking is lowering back pressure. Adding more NA power increases back pressure. It doesn't lower it. I think I'm sold on a low buck truck after looking at the options. Yeah, yours is a 6.2. I think I would get that. I think a 6.2, I might even go. I'm thinking I would go with the Truck Plus. Plan ever offering full cam kit with everything needed to recommend to install a cam on a spec engine? That would be nice. Like, what do you need besides cam and springs? Are you talking about you're wanting gaskets and things? Under what boost do sodium valves really help? I don't think any. I don't think that the sodium valve thing is in relation to boost. It's just a lighter valve, and it does dissipate some heat, I guess. But it's also, the valve is not nearly as strong. I'm looking at getting high miles, early 2000 Silverado, 2000 plus. It's an Elm 7. I'm looking at doing 78, 75, dual ball bearing. Build, would like to be able to turn it to 750 wheel horsepower and 85, but don't plan on starting there. Should I just do forged bottom end since I need the gap, change rod, pins, refresh gaskets? I'm doing pack springs. Should I just redo the whole valve train? You don't need to do any of that for 750 wheel horsepower. What you need to do is put a camshaft in it. You need to put springs in it. You need to put injectors in it and a pump. And then you can put that turbo on there. I would do ring gap, and then I would put that turbo on there, and then you'll be fine. You don't need anything else. You don't need a forged bottom end. You don't need new valve train. You don't need any of that. It will run a really, really long time like that if the motor is sound, which the vast majority of wrecking yard motors are, unless they've been crashed into. They work really, really well. Because when you're taking it apart to put ring gap in it, you're going to free up the oil rings, which are, if it has 200,000 miles on it, they're probably stuck a little bit. You're going to free those up. It's going to move around like butter. You're going to put ring gap in it. You're going to put it back together, and it's going to be golden. By the way, Jimmy, I saw Jimmy sent me a photo earlier tonight. He got the motor all gap, put ring gap in it, put the ARP head bolts on it, new gaskets and stuff. Sealed it all up with fresh gaskets and stuff. He didn't want it to leak anymore because the thing leaked like a sieve before the old motor did, and set it in the truck tonight. So it was good. Vancouver's in the house. Stock LY6 revs at around 5,500, and the Ripper cam has power till 6. How can I get the remaining 500 RPM? Does it come with the cam itself, or should I tune it? Every motor, any LS motor, any motor that you put a camshaft in that had a stock cam and you put a new cam in it, you will need to tune it. You'll need more injector probably also. So that should be a thing. If your LY6 has valve springs in it, which it does, it has 550 lift springs in it already. So when you put the camshaft in it, the camshaft will make the motor make power at a higher engine speed. So you'll be revving it up there already. But you'll have to tune it to get all that cammy goodness. E16 T28 compressor, 5371 and 5347. Okay. Truck Plus would require a spring change over the factory L92 rec port heads. Yes, it would. That's true. PSA, as tempting as it might be, do not buy cheap Amazon gaskets. I don't get those. I get Felpro stuff. How's the increase in back pressure a positive, or is this an effect of making more NA power? But how's that moving the knock threshold higher? How does back pressure move the knock threshold? It makes it more likely to detonate, if I'm not saying that correctly. And an increase in back pressure is going to be a function of making more NA power or making the motor bigger, which makes more NA power. All of those things make more NA power. But when you put the camshaft in it, you're talking about, and here's something you might not be understanding, is if we take a motor and we run it at 10 pounds of boost with a stock cam, and then we run it at 10 pounds of boost with a truck plus camshaft or a low buck truck camshaft or whatever, a camshaft that may add 75 horsepower NA, a truck plus camshaft, and run it at 10 pounds of boost, we're going to have more back pressure. But you know what else is going to happen? We're also going to have 100 to 150 more horsepower at that same boost level. So we will have more back pressure relative to the boost pressure, but we'll also have a lot more horsepower relative to the boost pressure because we put the camshaft in it. I want to put a turbo on my slant 6, not to go fast, but to make it up hills. Yeah, just low boost, that would be good. Thought, for example, moving a clip turbo wheel will reduce back pressure, flows more, and also raises knock threshold. If you reduce back pressure, you could make the thing less susceptible to detonation, if that's what you're saying. But you'll also reduce response. All of those things are trade-offs. Full kit meaning DOD, delete, gaskets, dumbbell, springs, lifters. You don't ever change the barbell thing when you do a DOD delete. I didn't know that you were talking about a DOD delete. I thought you were just talking about a cam kit. But we can do DOD deletes. We have those. Lifters, injectors. So how's a cam that has more overlap, aggressive, ramp, low, raise, knock threshold, but increased back pressure? I thought I just went over everything. I have a stock bottom end, our SBI full roller shaft set up for my 5.3. I have a spring kit set by TrickFlow with 350-pound springs. Is there any type of valves recommended for high pressure springs or factory okay? Yeah, 350 open is not terrible anyway. That's probably fine. I don't know why you went with a shaft rocker unless you're running lots of RPM. Do you need larger injectors for a bigger SS2 cam? Yes, you do. Well, I take that back. It depends on which LS. On a typical truck, 4.8, 5.3, 6.0 that has 25-pound injectors, you should put a bigger injector in it. Gaskets cost more than a junkyard long block. Yeah, they do. What do you think of 5364 heads? Are they any good? I don't know what those are. Crazy to me, the LSA on a factory VVT cam is 115. .5364 heads or LS3 heads. Then I think that they're the same as an 821 or an 823. I wouldn't try to use them on a 5.3 or a 4.8. They work on a 6-liter though, and a 6.2. Not really on the small bore stuff though. Not cool on the small bore stuff. Close out our poll at 62% saying no. Does a tune cost more than the turbo kit? Thoughts on L76 all-aluminum motor for a build out? The answer is yes to every LS that you could possibly mention, including an L76. They are all great for that. And an aluminum one, even better. An aluminum LS1, LS2, LS3, or the 6-liter or other 6.2 versions of the all aluminum motors, I wouldn't use for high horsepower turbo stuff. I'd only use the 5.3 for that. What approximate power per cubic inch does a Coyote make? What did that extrapolate out if a 5.6 was capable? You want to build a 5.6 out of a Coyote? Is that what you're asking? Best mods for an L33 and a Silverado. Cam is usually the one that most people go with. cam and springs and injectors and a tune. Ryan, that's really easy math. Whatever coyote you're talking about, how much power it makes, divide it by 5.0 and then multiply that number by 5.6. Yeah, we don't have to extrapolate it. We can we can actually multiply it. Should I port and polish the heads? If you want to make more power, you can. The reality is that the vast majority of 6 liters or 6.2s do not use all of the airflow that an 823 head has to offer, even stock, because they flow over 300 CFM, and not very many 6 liters are making more than 600 horsepower. It's hard to do. It takes a lot of stuff. The G42 good for an LY6? Yes, it's the ideal one for an LY6 wanting to make 800 horsepower. Because as soon as you put a camshaft in an LY6 and then put that G42 turbo on it, you're not going to stop at 800 because that's going to be just too easy to do. That's going to take very little boost. And the G42 will be really responsive on that 6 liter. On that note, it is time to go. But good times, good session, good live feed. I'll see you guys all tomorrow.